the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion. As one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen on fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Dharma Pujita Kaichubutra Paramo Nyumatsaranam Satam Vedyam Vastavam Atra Vastu Shivadam Tapatrayan Mulanam Srimad Bhagavatam Mahamuni Krite Kimva Parir Ishvaraha Sadyohidya Avarudyate Tra Kriti Susuvistakshana. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated. This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in its maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Nigamakapataro galitam phalam Sukhamukad amrita dravya samhitam Pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam Muhur aho rasika uvibhavakaha. O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful. Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 9, verse number 23. The personality of Godhead, who appears in the mind of the devotee by attentive devotion and meditation, and by chanting of the holy name, releases the devotee from the bondage of fruitive activities at the time of his quitting the material body. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Yoga means concentration of the mind detached from all other subject matter. And actually, such concentration is samadhi, or 100% engagement in the service of the Lord. And one who concentrates his attention in that manner is called a yogi. Such a yogi, devotee of the Lord, engages himself 24 hours daily in the service of the Lord, so that his whole attention is engrossed with the thoughts of the Lord a ninefold devotional service, namely hearing, chanting, remembering, worshiping, praying, becoming a voluntary servant, carrying out orders, establishing a friendly relationship, or offering all that one may possess in the service of the Lord. By such practice of yoga or linking up in the service of the Lord, one is recognized by the Lord himself, as it is explained in the Bhagavad Gita concerning the highest perfectional stage of samadhi. The Lord calls such a rare devotee the best among all yogis. Such a perfect yogi is enabled by the divine grace of the Lord to concentrate his mind upon the Lord with a perfect sense of consciousness. Thus, by chanting his holy name before quitting the body, the yogi is at once transferred by the internal energy of the Lord to one of the eternal planets where there is no question of material life and its concomitant factors. In material existence, a living being has to endure the material conditions of threefold miseries, life after life, according to his fruited work. Such material life is produced by material desires only. Devotional service to the Lord does not kill the natural desires of the living being, but they are applied in the right cause of devotional service. This qualifies the desire to be transferred to the spiritual sky. General Bhismadeva is referring to a particular type of yoga called Bhakti Yoga, and he was fortunate enough to have the Lord directly in his presence before he quitted his material body. He therefore desired that the Lord stay before his view in the following verse. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So we see three important points here. That Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appears in the mind of the devotee by one attentive devotion. That means paying attention to the detail, every little detail of the service that they render to the Lord. Two, by chanting the holy name, meaning Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. It appears in the mind of the devotee by attentive devotion and meditation, and by chanting of the holy name. So three things: attentive devotion and meditation, and chanting of the holy name. And this releases the devotee from the bondage of fruitive activities. The fruitive activities are, I should start this business, or I can advance in my profession, or etc. All these different ways of making more money. Or I can invest in some land, or I can buy a house in India and rent it out, and later on it'll be worth 10 times more than what I bought it. I can sell it and be a crorepati. So people have these different plans, and these are called fruitive activities. Now, should a devotee be always poor then? Actually, Prabhupada says it's better to be poor, because then you're always dependent, more, dependent on the Lord. So this is what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to do. Once they started the Gaudiya Math, every time they had some money, he would spend it right away for, Krishna consciousness. So, principle is, if you make $1 million a day, by the end of the day you shall have spent it also to spread Krishna consciousness. This is what the birds and the animals do. They go out and they find enough food for a day or so. Or they find enough food to last them a month, and then they hide it somewhere and they eat it a little bit every day. So the tigers don't actually hunt every day. There are many examples of tigers and lions that maybe sometimes corner a person but don't eat them because they're not hungry. Unless they feel threatened by them. They don't kill them either. They just walk away. So, animals do not, naturally, they do not take more than what they need. But when animals are domesticated and they live in a house, they end up getting fat and sick. Right? Even the animals get fat and sick. Right? But when they're living in the wild, no animal walks up to a tiger and says, "Oh, you can eat me, I'm tired of living." No, they all run away. So the tiger can't catch animals all the time. And whatever they do, they hide the carcass somewhere and they eat it little by little. Or if they're really hungry, they'll eat it all right away. But usually they'll hide it. So we have attentive devotion, meditation, and chanting of the holy name. So what does it mean by meditation? Well, if you engage in attentive devotion, then you'll be meditating on all the details of that devotional service so that you get it right and on time. So you're meditating on pleasing Krishna at all times. Prabhupada says that yoga means concentration of mind, detached from all other subject matter. And such concentration is called samadhi, where your mind is fixed on always pleasing Krishna. Samsadir haritoshanam. There's a famous verse that says that the highest perfection of the Varnashram system is pleasing Lord Hari. And that is the concentration of the genuine yogi. And actually such concentration or 100% engagement in the service of the Lord. So there's an equation here, is that samadhi equals 100% concentration or 100% engagement in the service of the Lord. It's not a passive concentration where you just sit down and meditate. You actually engage. So these are different understandings than the Mayavadi philosophers and personalists. They think, oh, well, you don't want to do any action because any action has a reaction. So let me just sit down in a quiet place and meditate. That's not the system of bhakti. Bhakti is constant action, but action in devotion without any material desires and focus completely on pleasing the Lord. And we see that also when Jesus, first of all, he divided a couple of fish and a couple of pieces of bread to feed 4,000 people. So that was a miracle. And then after that, he gave the Sermon on the Mount, probably the most famous sermon or preaching in Christianity. And so he didn't say, okay, now friends, we're all going to close our eyes and meditate. He didn't say that. First he fed everyone, and then he preached to them, right? And he was constantly preaching and healing people and so forth. So this, let's all sit down in a circle and meditate on the oneness. That's a bunch of nonsense. The real devotion or attentive devotion is engaging all the time in devotional service. Such a yogi, devotee of the Lord, engages himself 24 hours daily in the service of the Lord, so that his whole attention is engrossed with the thoughts of the Lord in ninefold devotional service, namely hearing, chanting, remembering, worshiping, praying, becoming a voluntary servant, carrying out orders, establishing a friendly relationship with the Lord, or offering all that one may possess in the service of the Lord. By such practice of yoga, or linking up in the service of the Lord, one is recognized by the Lord himself. So, if you want to be recognized by Krishna and gurus, then one should be concentrated 24 hours a day on performing devotional service and actually doing it, not simply thinking about doing it. And it says, by such practice of yoga, or linking up in the service of the Lord. See, yoga means linking, but bhakti yoga means linking up through the service of the Lord. One is recognized by the Lord himself, and it is explained in Bhagavad Gita concerning the highest perfectional stage of samadhi. Yoginam apisarve samadgatanantaratmanas shadavam bhajate yomam same yukta tamo matak. He's referring to that verse, and that verse says, it's the last verse of the 6th chapter, and when the yogi engages himself with sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed of all contaminations, then ultimately achieving perfection. After many, many births, I'm sorry, wait a minute. That's the previous verse. Verse 47 in the 6th chapter. And of all yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga, and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. Okay. That means that by engaging in devotional service, one becomes more and more purified, and thus one's previous karmas are all eradicated, and one can therefore meditate on the Lord 24 hours a day. Yesam twantikitam papam jananam punyakarmanam te dvanda mohinir mukta bhajanti mam jitarataha. Persons who have acted piously in this life and in previous lives, and whose karmic reactions have been completely eradicated, they become engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. What's interesting here is there's an alternate translation of this verse. I never realized that. So in 7th chapter, 28th verse, it says, persons who have acted piously in previous lives and this life, and whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, are freed from the dualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in my service with determination. However, there's an alternate translation in 6th chapter, 45th verse in the purport, which says, after many, many births of executing pious activities, when one is completely freed from all contaminations and from all illusory dualities, one becomes engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Okay, so both translations mean the same thing, but it's very interesting. I'm compiling a list of all the alternate translations of verses given by Prabhupada himself, not other people. Okay, so a person who acts in this way, who's always in samadhi, that means always engaged in pure devotional service, the Lord calls such a rare devotee the best amongst all the yogis. Yeah. So therefore he says, Same yukta tamo mata. That means that the devotee is the most intimately united with the Lord in yoga, and is the highest of all yogis. Such a perfect yogi is enabled by the divine grace of the Lord to concentrate his mind upon the Lord with a perfect sense of consciousness, and thus by chanting his holy name before quitting the body, the yogi is at once transferred to the internal energy of the Lord, to one of the eternal planets where there is no question of material life and its concomitant factors. What are the concomitant factors? That means things that happen simultaneously while you're in the material world. Misery. Misery always accompanies sense gratification. That's the law of nature. How do we know that? It's in the Bhagavad Gita, 5th chapter. That whenever one engages in sense gratification, it's either immediately or with some delay, accompanied by misery. 5th chapter, verse number 22. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses, O son of Kunti. Such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. So in the purport, Prabhupada says, he says, therefore those who are true yogis or learned transcendentalists are not attracted by sense pleasures, which are the causes of continuous material existence. The more one is addicted to material pleasures, the more he or she is entrapped by material miseries. There it is. And then in the Srimad Bhagavatam 3:25-13, it says, this is the law of the material world. As soon as we get some material happiness, there is also material distress. Did you know that? This is the law of nature. Yes, it's always accompanied by distress. So, we should give up selfish sense gratification and just be engaged. Every act we do should be for the pleasure of Krishna and with the instruction of bona fide Guru. And this, otherwise, we have to be aware that there's a law of nature. And every time we engage in sense gratification, it'll be followed by material misery. Okay, and it says here, a liberated soul is not interested in anything which is temporary. Knowing well the joys of transcendental pleasure, how can a liberated soul agree to enjoy false pleasure? That's the whole point. So when Arjuna had to stay away from the Pandavas for 1 year because he had violated a rule that they had, that is, that each one of the Pandavas would spend 1 year with Draupadi in privacy, and the other Pandavas would not disturb them. Well, once there was this danger of an attack by some enemies of the Pandavas, so Arjuna panicked a little bit, and he ran into the palace where Yudhishthira was with Draupadi in privacy. And he barged in on them and said, look, there's this problem here, we have to address it right away, we're going to be attacked. And Yudhishthira said, you have just violated our rules. Therefore you must go on, you must stay away from us for 1 year. So during that year, Arjuna had to be away from the Pandavas, his brothers. So he decided to go visit his father, Indra, in the heavenly planets. And there's a way of going to the heavenly planets through the Himalayas, in the Himalaya mountains. So he went that way. It's an easy way to get there. And he was with his father Indra, and at night Indra would be entertained by the Apsaris, especially Urvasi, an extremely beautiful woman. And when Urvasi saw Arjuna, she was attracted by him because he was very big and had big muscles and a very handsome person. So she told Indra, I want to be with him tonight. You ask him. So then Indra told his son, Arjuna, he said, Arjuna, Urvasi wants to be with you tonight. Arjuna was horrified. He said, what? He said, I can't do that. He said, why not? She's your favorite woman. I mean, basically, she's like my mother. I can't be with her. He said, no, Arjuna, you don't understand. These are Urvasis. They're not like that. They're not like ordinary women. They can do this. There's no harm in it. He said, no. He said, I cannot do that. I consider her like my mother. So you see, Arjuna was not, in a rush for sense gratification. He was a gentleman in every sense of the word. And when he barged in on Yudhisthira and Devaki, it wasn't because he was interested in being with Devaki. It was that he was worried about the safety of the Pandavas, right? But Yudhisthira was a strict moralist. So he said, oh, Arjuna, you violated our rule. So, and now he's in the heavenly planets where there's tremendous sense gratification going on. And Urvasi, which is like, if you just see her, you almost faint. She's so beautiful, right? There's no women on the earth can compare to her. But even though these Apsaris are so beautiful, there's no comparison of their beauty to that of Radha, Rani, and the gopis. So you see, that's why Krishna is not attracted to them. And Krishna's devotees, like Arjuna, are also not attracted. Okay, so if we concentrate our mind upon Krishna with a perfect sense of consciousness, and thus by chanting his holy name before quitting the body, the yogi is at once transferred to the internal energy of the Lord, to one of the, by the internal energy of the Lord, to one of the eternal planets where there is no question of material life and its concomitant factors, meaning misery. So, one is transferred at once. Now, it's impossible. You can't even reach the highest, we cannot even reach the highest planet in the material world. The scientists have calculated it takes 40,000 years to go from the Earth to the farthest planet in the universe. Now, who's going to live 40,000 years, right? But here, and then beyond that are the 7 coverings of the universe, and each is 10 times bigger than the other. And then beyond that are millions of other universes. And then beyond that, you come to the end of all that, and then there's the causal ocean. And so, and then you enter Vaikuntha. Each Vaikuntha planet is bigger than our universe. The planet itself is bigger than our universe. So how are you going to go back to Godhead and live, it's impossible. But for the sincere devotee, it says here, that he's transferred at once, immediately, by the internal energy of the Lord. And in material existence, a living being has to endure the material conditions of threefold miseries, life after life, according to his fruitive work. Such material life is produced by material desires only. So, where do we develop material desires? In association with materialists. That's why it's so dangerous sending our kids to these public schools and universities, because that's where their material desires evolve to an alarming concentrated way. And like, for example, Bill Gates, he quit college. He was going to Harvard. He quit because he realized that he could make a lot more money by starting an IT company and making a program that can regulate, the functioning of a computer. So he came up with MS-DOS. It's back in the 1980s, right? And he started a company with a few other friends. So, where did they get that idea? They got it in college. Now, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Well, you could say it's a good thing. You could also say it's a bad thing, right? Because the internet, the way people use it the most is for pornography. Every year, every month, the number one, let's say, platform that people go to, more than the news, more than sports, more than the weather, more than movies, is pornography. So, and that has poisoned the mind of many, many people. So you could say that although there are some benefits from the internet, it has done more harm than good. Right? So, therefore, Bill Gates is going to be responsible for that, and the others also. So therefore we see that these material desires, they bring more misery than happiness. And such material life is produced by material desires only. Devotional service to the Lord does not kill the natural desires of the living being, but they are applied in the right cause of devotional service. In other words, devotional service purifies material desires so that one only has desires to please the Lord. This qualifies the desire to be transferred to the spiritual sky. In other words, this qualifies the desire to be transferred to the spiritual sky. So instead of desiring material development and material sense gratification, one desires to be transferred to the spiritual sky rather than stay in the material world. General Bismadev is referring to a particular type of yoga called Bhakti Yoga. And he was fortunate enough to have the Lord directly in his presence before he quitted his material body. I don't know if that's right or wrong, saying quitted, before he quit his material body. He therefore desired that the Lord stay before his view in the following verses. So we see that Bhisma Pitamaha is endorsing devotional service as the real activity of the living entity. And one should desire only devotional service. And that's the meaning of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. It has one desire in it. Please keep me engaged in your service always, my dear Lord. Okay. All right, any questions? Yes. They're getting material desires. Yeah, this is explained in Bhagavad Gita. In the first chapter, there's a verse that's quoted from Srimad Bhagavatam. Find it. Yasyas buddhi kunape chudatu ke swadi kalachadisu vahomna ijyadi. So it says, it's a very famous verse. It's a difficult verse to understand for most people. Yasyasti bhakti bhagavat yakinchana sarve gunastatas samasate sura. Harava bhaktasya kuto mahat guna manoratanasati dahavato bahi. It says, one who has unflinching devotion for the personality of Godhead has all the good qualities of the demigods. But one who is not a devotee of the Lord has only material qualifications that are of little value. This is because he is hovering on the mental plane and is certain to be attracted by the glaring material energy. So your question was, there are people that get good education and then they do some charity and they do some good things. Is that it? Oh, not all of them. Very few become devotees. Right? So most of the people are materially motivated to do good things. They know that if I do good things, I'll get more honor, and people will like me. I'll be always politically correct. I'll give charity to the homeless, like Bill Gates. Right? But this is called manoratanasati dahavato bayi. That their mind is on the mental plane. Their decisions are made to further their material goals. So Bill Gates is a smart guy. He's not dumb. He's making more money than he needs, right? So he started a foundation where our Bhakta Daniel works, right? And what is the goal of his Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation? It's to do charity. And what kind of charity they do? They help people who have AIDS. They give vaccination for malaria and other things like that. They put free computers in every village in India so little kids can get contaminated and so forth. Yeah. So that's his thing. That's the thing. Now everyone, so when the politicians, they criticize the IT companies, they don't criticize Microsoft anymore. They used to before, when Microsoft seemed to have a monopoly. Now they criticize Google, Facebook, right? Those are evil. But they don't criticize, why? Because Gates figured out by giving back, then that's actually protecting his company. Whereas Google and Amazon, they haven't realized that. Amazon, oh my God, Amazon just gave, Bezos personally gave Australia $614,000, right? Or whatever, yeah. So the big headline was, Bezos is the cheapest guy in the world. He only gave, he's got, $100 billion, right? More than that. And he only gave 614 or 690 million, 90,000. Yeah. So they're calling him the cheapest guy on the earth. You see? Yeah. So if you want to get money, you set your house on fire. You'll get plenty of money. Haribo, all glories to Prabhupada. So those people are hovering on the mental platform, manoratanasati. No, it's always followed by misery. Every sense gratification is followed by misery. It's a law of nature. I didn't say that. Prabhupada says it, Bhagavatam says it, etc. Well, is there sense gratification in Bhakti Yoga? Let me ask you a question. So then you won't. But if you mix sense gratification with devotional service, you will. Yeah, it's a law of nature. That, don't you know, devotees get caught doing nonsense. Not sometimes, all the time. Yeah, even gurus. Yeah. And, how about priests? Priests get caught all the time, defiling little girls and boys. It's going to act. It's a law of nature. Is it?